What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Happy freaking Monday. My name is Austin Jardine. Welcome to the Vanguard Project podcast. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, got outside, enjoyed some fresh air, maybe went for a hike, hit the range, the gym, whatever it is that fills you up in your free time. I am super stoked for this episode. Listening to it again, it was a lot of fun. I feel like I took a lot away the second time around as well. But before we get into it, just a quick refresher of what this podcast focuses on. My goal in these interviews is best summed up as growth through story, strength through community. And what I mean by that is as I sit down with these folks, we dive into their lives to understand how they got to where they're at, giving you some insights or ways of thinking to help push you forward or find a community to join in on. So with that being said, I do my best to let the interviewees share their life experience and dive into what they've learned and give you something to chew on throughout the week. Fortunately, I've been super blessed to have been partnered with to have partnered with a few companies on this adventure. Today's episode is brought to you by Eberlestock. Eberlestock is based out of Boise, Idaho, and they manufacture some high-quality packs and technical gear. I've worked with them in a few different ways over the years, and I've been a gigantic fan of all of their packs. Most recently, I've been trading for a few different events, fixing to summit one or two peaks in Idaho this year. Then hunting season's coming up. It'll be here sooner than we think. Also, overall fitness as well, and some long range and pistol matches. So in preparation for all of these things, I've been hitting the gym pretty regularly with my F1 mainframe. I've been loading it up with anywhere between 45 and 80 pounds, kind of depending on whether or not I'm just rucking on the treadmill or using the stair climber. The F1 mainframe is their load bearing and meat hauler frame that can be coupled with just a bunch of different packs to switch it up for whatever you're doing. So that being said, if you need a new frame or a pack or maybe some technical gear, give my buddies at the retail store a call. Let them know that I sent you and get set up for your next adventure. So linked in the episode description will be a handful of other codes and discounts and all those good things. So check those out, but be sure to like, subscribe, follow, all the good stuff. And that's enough talking. So let's roll an awesome episode with Mr. Schoby of Field Ethos Journal. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Vanguard Project. For those of you new to the show, my name is Austin Jardine, and I'm just some dude outside of Boise, Idaho. Over the past couple of years or so, I've gotten really fortunate to have met some really neat people that have learned a lot from, kind of their life experience. And my goal with the show is to sit down with them, have them share with you what they've learned, how they got to where they're at, what it is they're up to, hopefully to give you, some insight or some motivation to try something new or get after what it is that you love. So with that being said, super cheesy intro out of the way. It's we're recording super early for me on a Friday morning. I'm like one sip of coffee in, and Mr. Schoby, thank you for hopping on with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Glad to join this morning.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk. I read your bio on Field Ethos, and I was talking to Shane, and you sound like probably one of the most interesting men in the world. So if you don't mind, I know that this is our first time talking, really. Do you mind just kind of introducing yourself, and I'll interrupt as we go?
Sure. Mike Schoby, as you mentioned, Chief Operating Officer at Field Ethos Journal. That's been a relatively new position as of May of this last year. Before that, I spent most of my career with Outdoor Sportsman's Group, editor of Peterson's Hunting, publisher Guns and Ammo. Before that, as a freelance writer. So kind of writer, editor, publisher, always been involved in the media aspect of this industry.
That's awesome. So have you grown up kind of in the outdoor industry, or was that something that you developed later on?
I've spent my whole career in the outdoor industry since I got out of college, and not with any background, not father or family ties into it in any way. I just, went to college at Washington State University. Was thought about being a lawyer. That was my idea, was, be a lawyer. And really by the time I got to be a senior, I was like, why do you want to be a lawyer? I really just I hated it. It was horrible. I learned that all the stuff you saw on TV, the courtroom dramas, while exciting and I think would have been very entertaining as a career, for the most part, doesn't pay very well. And the only reason I wanted to be a lawyer was to afford my hunting lifestyle. I mean, since I was, 6 years old. That's all I ever wanted to do was hunt and fish. That's all I did. I did all through my teens and through college, spent most of my time hunting and fishing. In fact, picked the university I went to, WSU, strictly because of the mule deer hunting, as well as the pheasant hunting and waterfowling around that school. So really, at the end of 4 years, I was kind of like, man, I don't really want to be a lawyer. I have no passion for it. I just want to hunt and fish, and just through happenstance, which you find so much, I think, in this industry. You meet somebody, somebody that had a connection to the outdoor industry. In this case, it was a guy named Skip Knowles, who is still an editor at Wildfowl magazine. But back then, he was the editor at Washington Hunting, Fishing, and News. And Washington Fishing and Hunting News was the full title of it. Small, obviously state-based newspaper, hunting and fishing newspaper. And, we got to know each other. He goes, man, all you do is hunt and fish. Why don't you start doing some writing for me? And I'm like, well, I've never really written anything other than college papers and things like that. And he goes, no, just, write down your thoughts on hunting and fishing in these different areas, and I can pay you $75 a piece. And I'm like, done and done. That's the end of my career right there. So I started cranking articles at 18, 19 years old for pretty small amounts of money, but that I thought was life-changing at the time. And that's what launched me into a freelancer, really.
That's a pretty good story. So what led you to maybe go back a little bit? What led you down the path of wanting to go and become a lawyer? Was there anything kind of other than, man, I just want to hunt and fish?
That's it. That was just money. I mean, if you looked at, a couple of things, actually. Money was a driver, but the other was back then, let's see, late 80s, early 90s. I graduated high school in 91. Courtroom dramas, were a big thing on TV. I mean, it was, it looked just so exciting and
Law and Order,
that type of stuff. And, they don't tell you your freshman year of college, hey, the average attorney makes, average criminal attorney makes $30,000 a year. And you're like, oh, that sucks. What you realize is that the corporate attorneys that are dealing with, contract and tort and everything else, that's what really makes a lot of money. And that happens, in my opinion, to be the most boring of all aspects of law. You don't learn that until you're a senior and you're too far invested in this path to do much about it at that point. No, it's just all I ever wanted to do. And so I guess early on, I had an uncle that was a doctor that went to Africa, and I remember seeing his photos. I remember reading Horn of the Hunter by Robert Roark as a kid and going, man, I want to go see Africa someday. And the only way I thought I could afford that was to somehow become a professional in law or in medicine. I was not smart enough for. How else do you afford going to Africa? And that really was my driving goal, as a kid.
Yeah. Okay. So you grew up then kind of in the outdoor hunting and everything world, right? Was there some like underlying passion or desire to make it a career, or were you like, hey, I want it just to be a hobby. Law is going to be what fuels it. I'm going to work to live rather than live to work.
Exactly. No, that's all it was. I just wanted to figure out how to carve out a path to be able to hunt as much as I could. I mean, I look back, and I actually kept a journal since, my earliest days. I look back at those days in college. I hunted 5 to 7 days a week, every day for 4 years. I mean, I would schedule my classes around hunting season. I'd make sure that I didn't have a class before 10 in the morning. So I could hunt in the morning. I would probably try to be done by 2, so I'd go pheasant hunting in the afternoon. And it was a rare day that went by that I didn't go hunting. For something, pheasants, go fishing for something, trout fishing, bass fishing, whatever. In the small ponds around the Palouse area. That's all I did was either fish in the early season or hunt. So that's it. That was always my passion. Since I was a little kid, that's all I wanted to do. And that was probably a product of my upbringing. My father was a big hunter, big fisherman, still is. He's 85 years old and probably fishes 150 days a year. He was, an amazing fisherman, and unfortunately was older when he had me. So his big game hunting was on its waning years. When I came up, but we still big game hunted a lot together, but we did a lot of duck and upland bird together. That was always my upbringing.
Yeah. Okay. So when you talk about scheduling your classes and stuff, and I'm going to ask this question mostly for, guys and gals that might be listening. They're like, dude, I'd love to be able to hunt while I'm in school. How were you able to structure your classes? And then how did that work for you around hunting? I mean, as far as being able to stack responsibilities.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? I mean, I graduated in 4 years. I had a pretty good GPA. so many kids in college flunk out. They don't make it. In fact, I remember, my dad went to Purdue actually. Before that, he was an engineer, and he said this. He said a professor said this to him as his freshman year, and I had a very similar conversation with a professor my freshman year, which is look to your left, look to your right. In a major, huge classroom setting, those kids won't be here when you graduate. 2 out of 3 kids will wash out, and I don't know. I always I had the ability to put my nose to the grindstone and work when I had to, and then hunt at other times. And that even probably helped me in life as a freelancer. When I was in my early 20s and I was just trying to, make a buck and make a name for myself as a writer, you'd hold a normal job and I'd still get up at 4 in the morning and try to get an article done, or I'd stay up till 2 at night. You're getting an article done. So you had to make your priorities. You had to keep your what paid the bills, whether that was school, that was your main focus, or a job out of school, as well as then carve out personal time to go hunt or to go hunt and fish or to develop a career in this industry.
Okay. Okay. So when you say working through priorities, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like when you're in school, school feels like it's the highest priority, but you also are trying to do kind of this freelance writing, paying the bills, all of these things. When you sat down and looked at your priorities, how did you structure it? I'm asking again, kind of for somebody that might be in a situation where they're like, okay, I've got all of these things that feel equally as important. How do I think about it?
I think you need to look long term, right? You got to realize that you can't get fired this week, this year from your day job, but you need to look 5 years down the road, right? And I always had that ability, I think, to look at a long-term goal and kind of set goals for yourself and say, here's where I want to be in 5 years. And I think a good example of that, I always worked in the industry, even in college. I got a job part-time in a gun shop. After that, after college, I worked in another gun shop, and then I ended up managing a shooting range, live on site shooting range, which is kind of a funny story right outside of Seattle. They hired me to be this live on range master, and allowed you to shoot every day and also manage the range and make sure nobody got shot, make sure the range was in good working order, and running a small business. And as part of that, they had a cabin on site. You got to live on site on this range and live in this little cabin. I was 22 years old probably. And when I interviewed for the job, it was they interviewed me in the main lodge clubhouse, which was this beautiful log structure that was just massive and beautiful grounds around it. And they go, yeah, and you live here. I'm like, fantastic, this would be great. I'm used to living with 4 guys in an apartment in college, and this would be a massive upgrade. It was surrounded by 250 acres of woods that you could hunt, when you weren't working, and you had the run of the place essentially. So after I took the job, they offered it to me and I took it. They go, okay, I'll show you the place to live. And it literally was a shack. It was a shack out back that was full of rats, full of mice. I used to sit inside there and shoot rats and mice with a 22 inside the house. It was obviously built on a weekend by a gun club work party. No insulation. It was just third world living. Back then I was dating gals, and you bring a gal back for dinner or something, and they would just look at this shack like, oh my God, this guy's never gonna make it. But that job, while that was a bad side of it, allowed me to shoot nonstop, as well as write during the day. I could pursue a freelance writing career. I could shoot nonstop. I could reload. I made almost no money, but you were looking towards the future. You were building an education.
Yeah. What was the maybe the most valuable thing you learned out of that experience?
I think learning to live within your means and waiting for delayed gratification. I think that's something that so many young people today, they want success immediately. And I've made a very successful career in the outdoor industry after probably pushing almost 30 years now. But it took years. I mean, for 5 years, you barely made money as a freelance writer. You struggled to, sell an article. You didn't make much money at retail. You didn't make much money, running a gun range. But I always looked forward to the goal, 5 years, 10 years down the line. Here's where I want to be. And I think if people enter any job, whether it's in the outdoor industry or in, normal life, with that mentality that I'm here to pay my dues, I'm here to learn, I'm here to, build a resume essentially that'll allow me to be successful one day, is I think a much better place to be. I've hired and had many younger kids work for me later on in my career. And it seems like there's this mentality that, hey, I've been here for 6 months. How about a raise? How about a vice president title? Like, well, let's put in 5 years first, there is definitely, it seems like from my generation to today's generation, a desire for just immediate gratification versus saying, you know what, I'm willing to put off financial as well as title and prestige several years down the road when I deserve it, you know.
Right. Okay. So in your experience then, with the delayed gratification, right? How long between, let's just say, starting from your freelance writing career to the time, how long did it take from the start of your freelance career to your first initial sense of gratification?
Probably
Rel-
6, 7 years, I would say. I graduated when I was 21. It was probably late 20s, you know, when you finally realize that there's a career here, there's something to be done here. And, you know, about now I was 25 exactly, just by happenstance. I guess that's probably another good life skill is pay attention to everybody you meet. You never know where that's going to lead you. You know, relationships in any aspect of business really do count for a lot. And I remember that in college, they said, you know, networking, it's a big deal. Well, who are you going to network with? You got 3 other buddies, you know, that also don't have jobs and don't have much prospects in the future. And that was a hard networking ability to have then. But as you get out in the real world, you start meeting people. And I was working in a gun shop in Seattle area. And this guy came in and I noticed he had a different accent. I'm like, where are you from? And he goes, Africa. And he was a professional hunter over for a trade show. No kidding. And I just bet his ear. I'm like, man, I want to, you know, you want to go to dinner? I'd love to talk to you about this and learn more about Africa. I've dreamed of Africa my whole life. And after the end of this dinner, he goes, you know, why don't you come over and go hunting with me? You know, just book a hunt and come hunting with me. I'm like, oh, I can't afford an African safari. He goes, no, I'll cut you, you know, smoking deal on it. Just come over. You'd like to see it. So I literally sold every possession I'd accumulated by 25, which amassed to probably $2,000. I borrowed $3,000 from my parents. They thought I was insane. And the total bill was about $5,000 to go to Africa with airfare and everything back then. And I went on my first safari and I was completely broke. And I remember sitting, you know, on my bunk in this lodge at night with a piece of scratch paper, writing down, going, okay, I shot a warthog today. That was $200. I could maybe shoot a Gems buck and afford that, but I'd like to get a kudu and that's this much money. I don't know if I have enough much money to do both of them. And there was no other amount of money. It wasn't like, I'll just get out a credit card and put it on my credit card. It's like, no, I've got this much money, you know, but, you know, like I said, my parents thought I was insane to spend all of my life savings and go into debt to go to Africa. As it turned out, it was the best thing I ever did for my career. You know, I hit it off with this professional hunter. And after the safari, he goes, man, why don't you come work for me next year? I'd love to have you come over here. And I'm like, okay. So I went home, you know, packed my bags, waited a few months, and I moved to Africa and ended up working for about a year for this outfitter and did everything. I mean, and that was the other thing. There was no, hey, you're going to be a professional hunter. It's like, nope, you're going to pick up clients at the airport. You're going to make drinks at the lodge. You're going to, you know, help clean animals. You're going to, if we have an overflow of clients and, you know, we'll let you kind of apprenticeship guide some of them. And it was just every, you know, menial task that they didn't want to do, but it was the best experience I ever had in my life. And at the same time, I was still freelancing for American magazines and doing a lot of writing. And my mother and father, very traditional. You know, my dad graduated from Purdue and went straight to work for Boeing as an engineer. My mom, you know, worked for Boeing as well. They were just very, you know, traditional in their job thought process. And they just were appalled that, you know, that I'm just wasting away my life at 26, 27, just guiding in Africa and working in Africa. And I remember coming home at Christmas and my mom was just like, you know, how are you going to explain this 2-year lapse essentially on your resume of not really working? I'm like, oh, I'm working. I was working in Africa as a professional hunter, you know, or with professional hunters, not a professional hunter myself. She was, I think it's going to be very detrimental to your career. And about that time, Cabela's called me, and I was doing a lot of freelance writing for Cabela's magazine and their digital online properties back then, which was kind of a new thing. This would have been, you know, in the early 2000s. And they made me a job offer. They said, hey, we'd like you to, you know, be a junior editor for our publication, and we'd love you to move out to Sydney, Nebraska. And I said, man, thanks a lot, you know, but I'm going back to Africa and my future's there, and that's where I'm going to stay. And I hang up the phone, and my mom goes, you know, Mike, you made all of $10,000 last year. You're 26 years old. You have no medical coverage. You have no 401k plan. You really might want to call them back. So I did. I called them back. Said, you know what? Maybe I'll take that job, and I did. I ended up moving to Sydney, Nebraska. And but in that interview process, when I sat down with them at Cabela's, that's all they wanted to talk about. They're like, "You've spent a year in Africa." Yeah. Just because you love to hunt. Yeah. Yeah, you're hired. They didn't even look at the rest of my resume. It wasn't, how was your grades and what was your degree in, and what else did you do on your resume? It was like, you've been in Africa, and that experience has probably followed me through my career. Where guys are just always been very interested, intrigued. Everybody has a love affair with Africa, and the fact that you just pulled up stakes and lived there for a year,
Right.
that really wowed a lot of future employment opportunities, I would say.
Okay. So a lot of things I was taking notes as we were going. So what what lent itself to taking the risk to go to Africa? I know that it was a dream of yours, right? It was something that you had thought about or aspired to work towards, right? But what helped you take the risk to move? Because to sell for somebody now, right, to sell all their stuff, move to Africa seems absurd,
Right.
right? What would you say to push somebody forward?
Well, I guess I didn't look at it as moving there at first. When I first went, it was purely, hey, this is going to be a 10-day safari, right? And
Fair, yeah.
I'll work for the next 2 years to pay off, that debt, and, maybe more than 2 years in my mindset. But it was just purely an opportunity to go. But once you get there and you go, oh my word, this is what I've always dreamed of. And this is wild Africa. It's, you by yourself, for part of my job, I work across Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Namibia. I was just on the road and just seeing all of Africa by myself. And it's a very enchanting place. And it still is. I've spent 50 trips there since then, I'm sure. So once you did that, once you made that initial jump to go do it, just on a normal safari, you fall in love with it. And most people that ever do that, I think, can make a very easy transaction, or if an easy transition. If there is ever an opportunity to go live here, I'll take it, especially in your 20s. You're not married, you don't have a girlfriend, you don't really have a house, you're renting something. It would be very difficult today, wife, kids, house, to say, I'm pulling up and going to Africa. But in your 20s, I would take advantage of any opportunity, whether that's, I've always dreamed of going to Ireland, or I've dreamed of going to Africa, or I want to go see, the North Pole. Take that opportunity when you're in your 20s, because you won't have it in your 30s and probably 40s. And if you do, you probably did something wrong in life. You can pull
You're
up
running
at
away.
40, if you can pull up at 45 and just leave, you may not have lived a great life. So
Fair. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good advice, just because I know that when you graduate college, right, to your point, it's like you don't really own anything and you have a whole lot of life left to live. So might as well take advantage of it.
yep. I mean, up until I was probably 30, I could have packed everything I owned in my pickup truck and left, and moved from state to state. And I did, actually. I went from Sydney, Nebraska with Cabela's, and then I did a stint in Wisconsin working for Gander Mountain, their competitor at the time. And once again, that was a job that came up because of my African experience. They wanted to start an international travel hunting business, booking business, essentially. And they knew even at age 30 at that point in time, I'd hunted Africa and Mexico and Alaska. And I did Alaska on my own, and hunted several Canadian provinces and a bunch of states. So at my age, I had a lot of experience traveling and hunting. And so they said, man, we'd love you to run our travel division for us. So I did about a 5-year stint there, and that was wonderful. That probably built even more my repertoire of where I'd been and hunted, because for 5 years it was a job of checking out lodges. And I just traveled around the world. I mean, anywhere that we wanted to have a destination, I would book a trip in there and go check it out, look at their lodge, see how they run their operation, and then we'd come back and offer that to our customers at Gander Mountain. So for 5 years, I filled a passport essentially.
Okay. So a question, how did you become so confident in traveling and checking out lodges and more or less kind of rating or determining whether or not they were viable for customers? I mean, because that's an
That's
interesting skill to have.
Well, it's stem back to Africa. That outfitter I worked for had big aspirations of opening up new places in other countries, fishing, hunting, and photo safari destinations. And so, since I wasn't a licensed qualified PH, a lot of the job I ended up doing was, they gave me a Land Rover and a bunch of cash, and they said, take off and go check out this lodge up in Mozambique, and you will see you in a week. I'm like, okay. And I would go. So while I lived there, I probably went to 50 different lodges in Africa to go check out, their operations and see how it was. So I had that just by happenstance, really, in Africa. And I think back on that, and literally they just gave me a wad of cash and a Land Rover. I didn't know how to drive on the left side of the road. I didn't know how to drive, with a right-hand vehicle. Damn near killed myself several times trying to learn how to drive in a foreign country. And I would just take off, and drive through Africa. And ultimately, and this is pre-cell phone. I mean, you didn't have really much means of communication. In fact, I just wrote an article for Field Ethos about one of my trips through Botswana, and it was just random because nobody really knew where you're at. You didn't have any GPS tracking. You didn't have a cell phone. And one night, I get to the border of Botswana. It was Botswana to South Africa. I was trying to get back to South Africa, and the border was closed, which they do. These rural border posts, they close at 10 o'clock at night. And I got there like 10:30, and it was cold. It was, below freezing that night. I didn't have a sleeping bag with me or anything in the car. So I just, I'm 26 years old, whatever. I'll just sleep in the car. So I'm about ready to go to sleep in the car, and this little knock comes at the door. And it was the Border Patrol guy, and a little native guy. And he was, I say little because he was a bushman. He was very diminutive in size. And he goes, "Sir, are you waiting for the border?" I go, "Yeah, I'm waiting for the border." He goes, "You want to sleep inside? It's going to get cold tonight." And I said, "Yeah, sure. I'd love to sleep inside." And I figured they must have like bunks or, accommodations for their workers or something. And I walk inside with him. No, they had an old school jail cell in the back of this border crossing with iron bars and like a metal fold down cot. And I'm like, okay. And so he just kind of shepherds me into this jail cell. And there's a wool blanket and like an old pillow on it. I'm like, okay. And he closes the door behind me. It's like this.
You're like, this is where I die.
And he locks it. And he goes, "What time do you want to get up?" Like, "What time is the border open?" He's like, 6 o'clock. I'm like, "Yeah, 5:30 be good." He's like, "All right." And I sat there going, man, nobody knows where you're at. Nobody knew my schedule. I don't have a cell phone. And I guess in a couple of weeks, guys might come looking for me. Maybe, I don't know. And I don't know if he's going to let me out of here or this extortion case or what this is. And I was just kind of getting my own head and freaking out that night. And I'm like, well, nothing to do but go to sleep and figure it out tomorrow. So I go to sleep, and I woke up with keys jangling at like 5:30 in the morning. And the dude, God bless him, has got like a tray of hot coffee and tea and rusks, which is our kind of like little breakfast biscottis. And he's like, "Do you take cream and sugar?" I'm like, "Yeah, both." And he goes, "Okay," and makes me coffee, and away I went. It was the coolest experience ever. There's nothing bad about it, But it was just like that could have gone totally sideways. Once you do enough things like that, and you run into those wild experiences in Africa, just because it is such a third world place, that not much rattles you after that. You start
Sure.
traveling to Europe or South America, or I've hunted every continent in the world, and not a whole lot rattles you after you do that for a couple of years of just traveling on your own through Africa.
Yeah. I believe it. Okay. So and this is kind of a fun question because I come from the very connected generation, right? Where
Mhm.
everything is instant right there, GPS phone. Was it freeing for you not to have GPS and that connectivity right then? Or was it a little intimidating and kind of nerve wracking?
You didn't know any different, right? I grew up in an era where literally college never had a cell phone. It didn't exist other than huge box phones you'd see on movies. I remember my senior year in college, they go, "Hey, we're going to show you something called called email." What the hell would you want email for? Like, well, because you could send somebody a letter electronically. I'm like, I don't send somebody a letter now. What would I want electronic mail for?
Right.
And you don't realize that flash forward 10 years, you live on email and you live on a cell phone, and but at that time you didn't know any different. It's just how it was. I mean, I remember another time I did it about 13 times. It was called the Trans-Kalahari Highway. It went from South Africa to Namibia, and we had a main lodge in Namibia, and it was about a 13 to 15 hour somewhat dirt track road before it was paved. Part of it was paved, kind of like our version of the Alcan Highway from Seattle to Alaska, just kind of through the remote wild Kalahari region of Africa. And I would drive this either with trophies, with me, with clients, whatever. Like I said, over a dozen times. And I remember breaking down in the middle of it. And all I had was like my jacket. I had a shotgun, a Beretta side by side in 16 gauge, a couple of candy bars, a couple of Cokes, and that was it. Broke down. And there was no way to communicate with the lodge. And so I just sat on the side of the road for like 2 days, and a car came by, and it was some white travelers. I don't know if they're hunters or photo safari guys. I'm like, "Hey," flagged them down. "Where are you guys going?" "Going all the way to Windhoek." I'm like, "Hey, there's a lodge between Windhoek and the border called Kalahari Bush Breaks. If you could stop in there and just tell them that Mike Schoby's broke down somewhere around the middle of this Trans Kalahari Highway, and let them know, I'd appreciate it." I go, "Okay." And then I sat there for like 2 more days, and I'm like, well, I don't know if anybody's going to come or not, and you just start walking. I don't know where you're going to walk. You're out in the middle. Literally, it's where they filmed. If you've ever seen The Gods Must Be Crazy, that old 19. You should watch it. 1970s Bushman Kalahari show. It's all filmed there. It's the middle of Kalahari Desert,
Okay.
and I'm just like, I don't know if anybody's going to come or not. Sure enough, like 2 days after that, a Land Rover comes down the road. It was the lodge owner, and he had a tow strap, and we towed the Land Rover for, several hours back to the lodge. But you didn't have communication like you did today. I mean, I remember writing letters home, and it would take 30 days for a letter to get there and 30 days for one to get back. It just took
Wow.
forever, so you had very limited communication ability.
Huh, okay. So what then in that experience, right? Kind of just the Africa experience, what was the most valuable thing that you've learned that you still apply today?
A couple things. I mean, tangible would be just independence. Take care of yourself. You'll be fine. It's very rare. 99.9% of the people in the world are nice. They're not out to hurt you. They're not out to steal stuff from you. There's the 1% that you got to watch out for. But independence, believe in yourself. Don't get panicked. But I think it all comes back to, on a career level, long-term level, is, putting in your dues and using every experience as a learning experience, to build your future career and build your future kind of mental repertoire of where you want to be in 5-10 years.
Yeah. Okay. So I took a note kind of going back a little bit to when you started to move into Cabela's and Gander, right? And your mom was like, hey, is this really smart to be doing this? Is this wise, right? You're not making any money, yada, yada, yada. Obviously, you were chasing something that was meaningful to you, right? Maybe not necessarily knowing that you were building your career at the time. How did you manage kind of your family and say, hey, listen, I'm doing this for myself. This is something I'm passionate about and want to be doing, right? To kind of continue pushing forward. How did you kind of set those expectations?
Yeah, I don't know if I did or not. A lot of it was, my parents were of a generation, as probably 90% of Americans are, that were not that go do something that's fulfilling to you. I don't think my father ever felt that being an engineer was fulfilling, that he enjoyed it, that he dreamed of somebody like to be an engineer and design airplanes and rockets. I don't think that was ever part of his mental makeup. It was, no, it's a good job. They got a great 401k plan. They have a pension plan. They have all these benefits to provide for my family. And I think in some cases, maybe people should get back to that a little bit, in the sense that there are examples like myself that have gotten lucky or fortuitous, and have been able to make a very nice career out of something they love doing. But that's not necessarily for everybody. I think that, having that stability and having that, looking at long-term goals of family and financial security, and maybe just doing something that you're somewhat happy with, is not a bad idea. But, so for my parents, they had a hard time, reconciling. And it wasn't until, I'm not kidding, probably maybe 10 years ago, I'm 48 now, maybe my mid 30s, when they finally thought, okay, he's actually going to make it. He's got a house, and he's got a 401k plan, and he's got a savings
He's
account,
not
that
coming back home.
he's not going to come back home. But, I guess they always did provide that. There was always a safety net there. It might not have been a lavish safety net, but it was a safety net of, I do remember calling my parents a couple of times from Africa. You could make an international phone call, obviously, with a calling card, on a payphone. Like, hey, mom, I'm broke. I get $100 put in my account. They're like, yeah, we'll help you put $100 in your account. So there was that somewhat of a safety net. It wasn't like, oh, here's a trust fund credit card and go have fun. But
Yeah.
you knew that if you ever got in enough trouble, financial or otherwise, you had a bed at home. You had somebody that would take care of you financially for a little bit. If I called and said, hey, I got a $10,000 gambling debt here in Cape Town, I ain't going to take care of you. But if you were, destitute and in a jail in Botswana, they probably would have helped you out. So I think that was a big thing, right? Is how always knowing there was some kind of family safety net there.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. So I know that you'd been writing before you left for Africa and everything. What I know, and I know that you said that you had one guy that helped you, and I wrote his name down. That lent itself, Skip helped you start writing, right? Was the first guy that helped you get into the freelance world of it. Had you been writing at all up to this point, or was there kind of just random? I see you shaking your head.
Not at all. I met Skip randomly in college, and he was a big time, in my mind, big time writer, editor. He was about 4 years ahead of me. He was graduating right when I was about a freshman. We briefly met, but we stayed in touch. And he, like I said, managed Washington Fishing and Hunting News magazine. And interestingly enough, that's a tiny little rag. Skip started his career there. I started my career there. Andrew McKean, who later became editor of Outdoor Life, and I think still might be today, started his career there. John Snow, which is the shooting editor of Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, he started his career there. All of us were from that Washington area. So that little magazine newspaper put out a ton of writers that have still, made good to this day in this industry. But no, it was purely happenstance. And I guess it was purely capitalizing on that moment. When you meet somebody that you go, man, that could help me out. That sounds selfish to say, but it was just, you kind of file it away in your mental Rolodex going, he's a connection there. Or I met a guy that, is a professional hunter, and that could be a connection there. When you're young, you start meeting people like that. You pay attention to who they are and what they do and how it may change your career and your lifestyle.
Yeah. How did you, and this is kind of a loaded question, but it's one thing to think about, hey, I know this person as a contact here can get me there, and kind of doing it selfishly versus just knowing and being smart about it, right? And being like, hey, I know this person can help me down the road. How did you navigate those waters?
I think you always have to provide something of value. If you enter a relationship saying, "What can they do for me?" I don't think that takes you very far. I think he's a connection, he's a conduit. He'll open a door for me, but you got to produce. Whether that's going to be a writer. I'll turn in a good article that'll never be late with a good photo package, and I'll always be that reliable guy for him. Because had you abused that relationship, if you had, okay, you got me a contract for an article, and you never delivered upon it, or you did a shoddy job, it would have been a one and done. You would not have gone much farther than that. So you need to recognize a conduit that'll get you somewhere, but then you have to do your side of the bargain, whatever that is. It's a job for them, or you really need to deliver, or you'll quickly be, not only will that door shut, but especially in this industry, it's so small, everybody knows everybody, and it does not take very long, for good or bad, to say, oh, that guy always does his work. He always gets done on time. He does great material. You need to work with him, or I'd avoid that guy. He left me hanging on 3 articles, and never did respond to an email. And, he was late on 2 of them, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't take long, good or bad, for that to get around the industry.
Right. Okay. So when you started to develop your writing skill, was that something that you had kind of wanted to start working on, just stepped into? Did you decide just randomly, like, okay, great, I'm going to take this one and then start to build myself as a writer?
No, I just didn't know anything about it, right? I mean, I was a voracious reader since, I was a child, and I think I read everything sporting you could, from modern to classic, and everything. I just read nonstop. So I didn't have any formal training as a writer, but I was a voracious reader. I didn't think there was ever an opportunity to be a writer and get paid for it. I didn't know that was a job option. That was maybe another complaint of a university experience. When you go to university, you get assigned a counselor that kind of is a career guidance counselor. For the most part, they're either grad students, which have never done anything in their life, or they're somebody that's lived in academia their whole life and have never done anything in the real world. So they don't have these, you could become a freelance writer. Here's about what the salary is. You could become a travel agent in the hunting world. Here's kind of what that salary is and what that job looks like. They don't know. I mean, there was definitely a void in, I won't call it vocational training, but in ideas of what you could do. So I never even had the idea that you could become a writer. It wasn't until happenstance, that in meeting Skip, that, oh, this could be a career. You could do this. And so I kind of had on the job training with him. The first articles I turned in, I've saved every article I've ever written, and you go back and read them, like, oh my God, that's horrible. That is really bad writing. But you would emulate what you read, which is also really bad writing in most magazines and newspapers of the day. But Skip was very instrumental in kind of building you and sending back good, creative edits. Like, the worst thing you can get is your mom saying, that's great, I think it's wonderful. Well, it's not very good, but your mom says it's good. You want a guy that goes, why don't you try that again? That's not very good. This whole opening paragraph sucks. You want that, constructive criticism. And that's what will build you. If you can't take constructive criticism and take, some critical thought about what you did, and you just think it's the best, you'll never grow. You need somebody to kind of tell you, I'd change that up if I was you, and rewrite that.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know anything about how kind of the freelance and writing world kind of functions. Do you mind kind of sharing your track into it and what that looks like? So if anybody out there is like, man, that kind of sounds like fun. I love hunting. I love fishing. I'm good at reading, maybe not writing yet, but I want to break into it. How does that look like?
It starts with a lot of rejection. Back in the day, it was all written rejection, actual form letters. You'd write a letter, excuse me, to an editor. You'd say, hey, I got an idea for an article. Here's what it's going to be. And I got this photo package for it. And you'd write that up and you'd send it off, and you'd wait a month and you'd get a rejection letter back saying, no, thanks. Shut up, kid. And I'd put them on the wall. I had a little nail stuck in my wall. I would just stick rejection letters on it. And then somebody would go, yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? I'll commission that article. I'll pay you $250 for it. Great. Here's the deadline. I need it by July 1st. You'd write it up. For the first 2-3 years, the rejection letters far outweigh the acceptance letters. And I'm sure this happens today. It's just all email. But after you establish yourself and after you start getting your byline in more magazines, you get known for delivering something on time that's good and it's got a good photo package with it. Then it kind of swaps from you asking them to people calling you, editors calling you saying, hey, do you got the bandwidth to do an article on this? You've been to Africa. Can you write a primer on African hunting? Yep, I can do that. And then it'll get to the point, if you're good, that you get more work than you can probably handle. And you'll have to start backing it off or just taking the assignments that are paying top dollar. And that's generally the progression of it. But yeah, it starts with, early on, a lot of querying, a lot of, trying to just sell your work to them looking for your work and trying to buy it. And that also goes back to networking. I remember going back to SHOT Show in my early years. It was just trying to meet editors of magazines because you couldn't get through to an editor. And that's probably true today. Most of them get inundated with phone calls, get inundated with query letters. They do not respond very well. So back when I was in my 20s and early 30s, when I'd go to SHOT Show, it was like, ooh, that's Anthony Licata. He's editor of Outdoor Life, Field and Stream. I want to talk to him. That's Gordy Cron. He's editor of North American Hunting Club in the day. I want to talk to him. And you got to know these guys. And after you got to be buddies with them, then it was a phone call away. You no longer were just blind querying somebody you didn't know.
Yeah. Okay. So when you'd go to like SHOT Show and stuff and approach these guys, were you approaching them with like the, hey, my name's Mike and I write and I want to be your buddy and these things, or was it kind of a little bit, how did you navigate that?
Probably to my detriment. I was a young, eager beaver kid that probably bored him to death, I'm sure. I definitely was not cool and subtle about it, and I probably should have been. They've all become good friends. All these guys and it was interesting. You meet guys like Anthony Licata back in the day, or Gordy Cron, and they were all relatively junior editors. Well, now they're all my age or older, and they're all senior editors somewhere, or directors or publishers. And we've all come up in this industry together. But creating that network of guys, and yeah, I guess if I could look back at my 26-year-old self, it would have been, played a little cooler. Just just try to be buddy. Go buy the guy a drink and get talking shop with it. Don't just, hound him, I think one thing I did that probably set me apart for Christmas one year, after I got to know who all these editors were, I made my own home wine. I lived out in Nebraska, and not for any reason of, wine snobbery. I just literally figured out early on, it's like, I can make wine for like $2 a bottle versus $7 a bottle. And, I can make cases of it. And so I made my own wine, and I made my own custom labels with my name on it. It was a real funny copy on the back about how, these grapes were probably stomped not by foot because of a foot fungus, but by hand. And they were all bought from the half off bin at the local grocery store. And just this kind of satirical, funny copy. And I packaged up every box of wine and shipped it to every editor of a magazine for Christmas. And all of them called me like, that was awesome. That's not only great writing, but it was a great gift. And thank you. So doing little things like that, not just sending a Christmas card, but trying to find something that's funny, that gets them to know who you are out of the masses of other guys that want to be writers. I would say today, the influencer, is probably similar to the freelance writer was 25 years ago. There was lots of them. There was lots of guys that wanted to be freelance writers. And it was hard to break through that noise. That's probably similar to aspiring influencers today, where they're trying to do some stick that gets them noticed, gets them picked up, gets some sponsorship, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you compare or stack up the influencer world, the media world versus like the written world now?
I think the big problem, if there is one, of the influencer world is that there is no check and balance to it whatsoever. It's a democracy of information for good and bad. By meaning that, like, there was always an editor, it was a junior editor, a copy editor, a senior editor in place of a true media structure. There was kind of a check and balance. No, we'll not publish. Either that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or that's offensive, or that's, not how we want to portray hunting, or that's not how we want to portray long range shooting. There was always a senior guy that, for good or bad, controlled that narrative. Today, obviously, with everybody's got a voice on a social media platform. On some cases that's good, and in many cases I think it's bad and detrimental for hunting. You get people posing horrible shots with animals and offensive shots with animals that I think does fuel the hatred of hunters. It hasn't helped hunters at all. I mean, I think Matt Ranella recently wrote a story about how influencers are bad for hunting, and I don't disagree with him. I mean, influencers without a check and balance, just, hey, I'm going to publish whatever I want, that's not always the best thing for them, not the best thing for our industry or hunting as a whole. So yeah, it's different. I guess it's the lack of adult supervision, and there's many things I've written up until this day that an editor will go, you may want to back that off a little bit. That's a little bit rough, or that's a little bit offensive. And you go back and read it a week later and you go, yeah, he's right. I probably should. I'm glad we did change that. We didn't write it quite that way. Whereas today, somebody will just write whatever they're thinking. They publish it themselves, on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. And it's out there. It's out there in the ether. There's no taking it back. So that's probably the main difference, really.
Okay. Okay. So growing up kind of in the writing world, have you learned to kind of temper yourself pretty easily in order to be, I guess, a little bit more socially acceptable? I don't know how to say that. Or is that something that you had to learn kind of as you went?
Yeah, both. I mean, when you're writing for a traditional publication, Peterson's Hunting, Guns and Ammo, Outdoor Life, yeah, definitely have to temper what you want to say, for a couple of reasons. One, it's for everybody. As editor of Peterson's Hunting, I can't tell you how many times I'd get letters from 75-year-old guys going, "What the hell? You guys said shit in an article, and I give these to the local Boy Scout troop, and I give them to my grandson, and that's offensive." And you got to realize your demographic is an older demographic, and they've been subscribing to that magazine maybe for 40 years. And so you'd come in and try to change it or write something a little bit more, racy, and it did not go well. When I came on to Field Ethos is the exact opposite of that. We started from the ground up. Don Trump and Jason Vincent, brainchild Field Ethos, kind of as a counterculture movement against the traditional media, and the traditional, I don't want to say censored, but curtailed media that they were used to seeing, whether that was Peterson's or Outdoor Life or whatever. And they just wanted to say whatever they wanted to say. And by doing that, they've found a home. There are so many people that do want to read. So it's a different model. People attract to what they're saying, and they've developed followers that are very okay and very accepting of an unapologetic, anti-woke hunting narrative or shooting narrative. And so they don't really offend their readership much because their readership is wanting that. So when I've joined Field Ethos, my writing, it's been kind of liberating. It's like, oh, write what you want, write. We're not going to really censor much. And it's found a home. So I think it can go both ways. It depends on who your audience is, right? I mean, if your audience is expecting one thing in a magazine and that's what they bought into, you kind of need to toe that, I don't want to say the party line, but you need to write to that reader. If it's something like on Field Ethos, we're attracting readers because of the type of writing we're doing.
Okay. So talking about Field Ethos, then when you guys started to develop Field Ethos, how did you go about kind of saying, hey, we want to, portray hunting in this way and firearms in this way and be towards, anti-woke? How did you guys sit down and develop that and say, hey, there's a world of people out there that will appreciate this?
I think it all comes back to just plain honesty. And that really has probably been the driving force of Field Ethos from its inception by Jason and Don, which is just pure honesty. If you look at the movement of hunting and where it's been going, it's been very dishonest. If you look at, Meat Eater and, Steve Ranella, their method and what they're all about is, hey, we hunt to eat. Well, that's completely disingenuous in my opinion, and in Field Ethos opinion. That's not why you hunt. Meat is a wonderful byproduct. My family's lived off game meat almost exclusively for 30 years, and probably before that, my father as well. But that's never why we hunted. I mean, if you look at the cost involved in hunting, you cannot justify. You could go to your local farmer's market and buy, free range chickens and, Icelandic sheep and, everything else for a pittance of what you pay to hunt. So you can't make that justification. Now, it sounds great at a New York cocktail party. When an anti-hunter goes, oh God, that's horrible. Why do you hunt? And you go, well, I do it to feed my family. They go, oh, that makes sense. I like, yeah, I get that. I'm not for trophy hunting. I like meat hunting. That sounds good. You go, well, that's bullshit. It's not why you're hunting. You hunt for family, you hunt for culture, you hunt for experience, you hunt for entertainment. There are many reasons, maybe a mix of all those reasons why somebody hunts, and meat's one of those reasons. But to say you do it for, sustaining your lifestyle and stocking the freezer, it's a byproduct. And so that's very disingenuous. All of a sudden it's like, why are you going to Africa? Africa is an adventure. You should celebrate that adventure and the culture and getting to know the people and learning about the animals and feeding, other people with the meat you shoot. Those are all reasons to go to Africa. But to say, oh, I hunt for meat and fill my freezer with it, and I'm going to Africa, or I'm flying to Alaska to go catch salmon. It's like, really? Do you know what the global footprint, the carbon footprint of you flying to Alaska to go catch salmon is? I mean, it's not environmentally sustainable. It's not, it's not economically sustainable. So it's a disingenuous statement, just like so much of the gun culture is, well, you saw that with Ryan Bussey's book. I'm pro-gun as long as it's a shotgun, as long as it's a handgun, which I find very strange because handguns kill, unfortunately, more people than any other type of firearm out there. But I'm not okay with ARs. Like, oh, wait a minute, you're either okay with firearms or you're not, and there's not a lot of gray area in there. And so many of the media outlets have tried to make these gray areas why they do something to justify. And so we have a very unapologetic, honest take on things. And that extends not only to our ethos of why we hunt, shoot, own guns, but also in how we deal with advertisers and people we support. There's many companies that are not advertisers, but they make a great product. Glock is a good example of that. I mean, you'd be hard pressed not to say a Glock is a great carry firearm. They don't spend a dime with us, but we still extol the virtues of Glock because honestly, that's a very good firearm. We purposely don't partner with companies that are not comfortable recommending their product. Don's been very clear on that from the very beginning. Later on in my career, after a writer, I became a publisher. And as a publisher, you're kind of more in charge of the business side of a magazine. And honestly, you're looking at, anywhere you can make revenue and where you can make budget. And so you'll partner with a lot of companies, some of which you may or may not believe in completely. And Don looked at it completely. There was like, look, we're well funded. We don't necessarily need advertising dollars. I only want to partner with people that are guns I would personally use, or I'd personally recommend to my friends. And if they don't meet those criteria, not something I really want to partner with. I don't want to put my name on it. I don't want to put the Field Ethos brand on. And we've operated in that fashion. And I think because of that, the honesty in both why we do what we do and the honesty in who we recommend using, whether that's an outfitter or a product, has really reaped a lot of dividends for us. People really are excited about that because we're not just shilling a product. And that's something they're not getting elsewhere. Influencers 100% are shilling product for a manufacturer for pay. Magazines, television shows, all of them, in order to operate the way they have to operate financially, they have to just shill product, good or bad. It could be a great product by happenstance, or it could be absolute garbage that they have to shill. We don't operate that way. And that's, I think, probably is what's creating the buzz around us.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And it's funny because, I spent some time, before you and I sat down, I think it was last week when I was looking through your website, and it's funny because you can definitely see that, right? The simplicity in the website in and of itself, what you guys stand for, and how straightforward everything is, right? I read through, I didn't even know how many articles, and it was kind of fun because you could almost hear the voice of people in each article, right? It was like, there was no fucks given. It was really fun, reading it. Okay. So when it comes down then to kind of establishing the honesty of it, right? I can only imagine that being blunt, honest, very selective, has a lot of pros, but also has a lot of drawbacks to it. How do you guys, both either individually or as a company, right, navigate kind of the naysayers?
Well, from the consumer side, we really have got a cult following. I don't think we have a lot of naysayers, and we very rarely get any complaints. But you're right, there is definitely an advertiser relationship, and we try to be very honest with our advertisers. Like, hey, we're brutally honest at times. It starts at the very beginning. You got to look at who you want to partner. When you partner with Leopolds of the world and Blazers of the world and Walders of the world, SIGs, there's not a lot of bad things to say, right? I mean, they're all really good products, and that's not some. So if you start with those type of financial partners, you don't have to sugarcoat stuff. It's when you start with B and C and D tier companies that you got to go, well, we'll pick this product to talk about and not that, or we'll try to sugarcoat this. So we've avoided it from the very beginning by just saying, we don't partner with those. If it's a company that, like I said, if we wouldn't use ourselves, and Don asked me that question early on, I was pitching him an advertiser that wanted to be part of us. And I said, man, they're willing to pay this much money. He goes, do you ever use that product when you go out bird hunting? I'm like, no, I normally grab this product. He's like, well, there you go. That's who we want to partner with, it, not this one. So you start from the very beginning. But even when you've picked the very best of the manufacturers, which we've done, occasionally there'll be something you don't like about a product. And, since we're honest about it, we'll say, the color of that's ugly, or, I didn't care for the trigger, or I didn't like this, because you're trying to deliver honest editorial messaging to your readers. And you will get blowback. It may cost you money. You may get a manufacturer that don't like that. I'm not going to support you again, because you were honest about it. So it's a knife edge, right? You got to kind of walk that and say, what's more important, your readership or your advertisers? Unfortunately, not unfortunately, the readers are more important, but the advertisers keep you afloat, so financially. So I think we're kind of creating a business model that, we just launched our first print publication. We're charging an absolute premium for it. We're charging $15 a piece. Compare that to most magazines are $3 to $5 a piece. We're charging 3 times as much. So we're putting more, and it's selling like hotcakes. Guys are buying it nonstop. And by doing that, it doesn't make you as dependent upon an advertiser, right? If the reader is willing to pay for that content, then you can kind of go, okay, we're a little bit more independent because we do charge a premium for our magazine. And if you go back and look at Field and Stream and Outdoor Life and Peterson's all back in the 50s, 60s, they were very autonomous. I mean, there was a separation of church and state between editorial. Guys wrote what they wanted to write, whether it was Elmer Keith or Jack O'Connor. I mean, the writers of the day single-handedly probably sunk the Model 70 post 64. I mean, they just bashed that rifle. That wouldn't be allowed today in a modern publishing world. It's like, no, Winchester spends this much money with us. You can't talk like that about that. So that separation of church and state in most mainstream media has been really blurred, and the advertising dollars sometimes outweigh the true editorial message. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to avoid that, and really ultimately, if you put your readership first and give them honest stories, they stay with you, they keep following you, they keep reading it, and advertisers want to be part of that. And when you say something great about an advertiser, which in many, many cases it's very warranted, then it means something. If you just say everything's great all the time, how much value are you?
Yeah. So when you guys start to bring on, I guess either new advertisers or these top tier companies, are you actually like, I know that you say you'll grab, X product when you go out bird hunting rather than, Y product, right? So when you guys are selecting your, top tier products, right? So when you're going out bird hunting, to use that analogy, right? If you're picking X product versus Y product, are you relying on either all of your past experiences to say, hey, we want to work with this company, or are you actually reaching out to hypothetically, right, the Leopolds and saying, hey, I'm contemplating working with Leopold, I want to have these products to talk about. Can you help me find a way to engage with you? Or how do you navigate those partnerships?
A lot of it's your past experience, right? And so we will couch that with, if there's a new company on the scene, you go look at their product, you'll test it first, then go. A good example of that is, luckily I've had 30 years of testing products, and I know every company out there and how it works and how good it is. Don is equally as adept. Shockingly, I think most people look at Don as, he's a celebrity, president's son that kind of likes to hunt. Absolutely not. Don is a 1%er on gear, and the guy is nuts. If he wasn't Don Trump, he would be an editor of any one of the publications out there, Guns and Ammo, Shooting Times, whatever. He is an absolute gear geek. So he brings a wealth of knowledge to that table as well, that his past experience. But I think Taurus is a good example. Taurus has got a history of like, they're okay. If you can afford this, it's a just decent handgun. Well, about 3 years ago, Brett Voorhees came on as our CEO, and he has just completely flipped the script with Taurus. I mean, he is starting to Taurus is making some really fine firearms in the U.S. With their U.S. manufacturing capabilities, both in the semi-automatic handgun space, in the big bore hunting revolver space, and in their 22 rimfire space, like their TX22. So I know Brett. We'll do a partnership together. And the first initial reaction was, it's Taurus. Does that fit our model of a company that we would wholly recommend? And I said, guys, it's changing. Taurus is not what you thought it was 5 to 10 years ago. And so we took it on as a partner and very openly said, we're going to test these out and report back on our findings. And guess what? So far, the TX22, their Raging Hunter series, their auto pistol have been excellent, and we're reporting accordingly, and telling guys how well these are. And that's a story to be told, because I think there is a perception that like, they're made in Brazil and they're good, they're serviceable, they're economical, but they're not necessarily your Smith and Wesson. Well, that is changing, and we've adapted our thought process to say, now you should definitely look at these guns. They're an excellent, not just for the money, but an excellent gun. But then in the cases of Leupold, we've had a 30-year history with them. And in the cases of Blaser, I've been shooting Blasers for 20 years. It's like, these guns, they have not changed. They've always been excellent, and they're still excellent. But as a company changes and evolves like Taurus, we're always willing to look at that and honestly test it and honestly review it.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that Field Ethos isn't just review, right? You guys write a lot of articles on, hunting, guns, ammo, tactics, gear, all of these things, right? How do you guys kind of separate who does what and then go down the rabbit hole?
We've got it broken out. We have one new piece of content on digital that comes up a day, one new feature article, and I think we're at about 20% gear and 80% the rest of buckets: fish, hunt, adventure, travel. And we try to have a new piece every day, no more than about 2 gear pieces. We're not a gear review site. We're not somebody that's just trying to review gear, but it makes up 20-30% of what we do is our gear type reviews. But the other 80% is experiential: hunt, fish, travel, adventure.
Okay. And the folks that you're trying to target, who are you trying to target? What's the message that you're trying to share with everybody?
Really, I kind of jokingly couch Field Ethos as, 1960s Playboy meets Mad Men meets True Magazine, that, revitalization of the adventure loving, unapologetic traveler, hunter, angler, that we've gotten away from. It's shocking to even think about that in an quote unquote unwoke industry, the hunting and fishing one, we've had this, seismic shift, I think, in very apologetic for why we hunt, very apologetic and couched for why we own firearms, very reserved, almost browbeaten, if you will, of how the mainstream world is so against what we do, and we need to really be careful what we say and apologize for it. I'm sick of it. Don's sick of it. All of our guys at Field Ethos are sick of it. And so there's also a massive group of consumers that are sick of this, sick of this type of, kowtowing to the masses. And so anybody that is not interested in following a PC line is our consumer. Anybody that just goes, no, I love to hunt, period. I'm a hunter, whether I'm a woman or not. I hate she's a great woman hunter or female hunter. It's like, no, you're a hunter, period. If you identify as a hunter, an angler, an adventurer, and are sick of, party line, PC, woke type content, we're for you.
I love it. And it was fun. And it's fun reading too. I gotta say it was fun.
I think it's kind of funny because of that mantra. We've gotten some of the world's best writers working for us, in some cases very much above board, like your Pat Hemingway's, Ernest Hemingway's great grandson, does a lot of writing for us and very much exclusively to us. But we've also got some of the absolute best writers in the industry that we've put up under nom de plumes, because they're almost still scared to say, I don't know if this is what I really want to say. I don't know if I want to tie my name to that. Like, good, write it for us anyway. We'll put it up under Mr. Black, Mr. Pink, So we've got some of the best writers that are household names. They go, I've got an opinion on something and I want to say it. And it may affect my sponsorship, or it may affect my main writing career with a magazine if I say it under my name, but can I write it under Mr. Black? Absolutely, write it, So we've become a platform for, I think, once again, complete honesty, but people just saying their honest thoughts and opinions.
Yeah.
And I think it's lacking even in social media. You look at how Dawn gets ratcheted down, or it's sometimes Field Ethos gets ratcheted down. I mean, there's big tech controlling what we say. And that's one of our main goals in this next coming year. And we're doing a pretty good job of it now, is taking people from that social ecosphere, using that as a megaphone and bringing them over to our site, having them sign up to our newsletter, getting our print publication, because I think all of us agree that social media may go away for us, for our space, for the hunt, fish, shoot community, probably not fish, but the hunt, shoot community. We're living on rented ground where the landlord hates us, right? And there could be a very quick time. I mean, if you ever imagined, a sitting president of the United States getting shut off from social media, that's insane. That's complete censorship, And the definition, in my opinion, of censorship is, I may completely disagree with your message, but I completely fight for your right to say it, and
Right.
living in a world where that's not allowed anymore. It's like, you disagree with me, we'll just shut you off. I think all of us in the hunting and shooting community run that risk, and it's probably a very realistic risk in the next 5 years. So the more people that you can get to come follow you on your own sites, with your own messaging, with your own email, is really probably the way of the future.
Okay. So I know that you mentioned that you guys are pretty selective in who it is that you work with. How do people get a hold of you if they're like, hey, I have this piece that I'd like to say, send it to you? How do you get people to reach out to you, navigate those waters, right? Or are you not looking for any additional writers at the
We
moment?
are always. And in fact, our new print magazine, which is coming out March 1st, it is full of guys that came in from Instagram. It's not your traditional. There's some of them that are, you'll recognize names. Go, oh, that's a Boddington, or that's a Pat Hemingway's piece. But then there's a lot of fantastic features that came over completely over the transom, that were guys that were just followers, fans that have never written before, and they happen to have great skills. And that was the other thing. And you look at traditional media, I think they definitely was a good old boys club. It took me 5 to 8 years to break into that good old boys club. This is an opportunity for guys that, never tried it before, to go, yeah, I think I could write something, and then submit it to us. And we may tell them, no, it sucks, sorry. But, we're definitely looking for guys that have not written before. Jeff at fieldethos.com. Jeff Johnson's our main editor, and we just published that the other day. Said, hey, you got an idea? Drop it over to Jeff. And we'll take a look at it. But a lot of the stuff we publish are guys that are not known writers or have never written before. And we welcome that. If you can find different voices to give their perspective of the hunting and shooting world, I think it's very valuable.
Okay. So I know that we talked to just before we started recording that there's a misconception that in order to get into the outdoor industry, right, you need to be a hunter or the influencer or some sort of filmographer, whatever the case may be, right? What experience do you have, or a writer, right? What experience do you have with folks that are trying to get into the industry that have none of those? Either they're not trying to do that as a full-time career or trying to get in with some of these other jobs. I know maybe with Field Ethos on the back end site, right? Website management, coding, right? What experience do you have in helping folks get into the industry with those types of skills?
I think first and foremost, having a passion for whatever this aspect is, and that's what I've always said. I've hired 50, 60 guys, maybe more than that over the years, young kids out of college, some females. The ones that were marginally passionate about it, like, oh yeah, I used to shoot with my grandfather and I own a gun. It's probably not for you. You work really hard in this industry. You spend a ton of time at it, and you'd be much better served financially to go in the medical prosthetic business. I mean, you're going to work really hard, but, and so we actually, the kids that I would hire that weren't that passionate would wash out in a year or two. They're just like, yeah, you know what? Such and such corporation on the just doubled my salary. Okay, have fun. The ones that go, man, I got to shoot, all Friday with a bunch of somebody else's guns and ammo, or I got to go to Africa, that a company paid for, or I got to, I'm just around guns all the time. We'll turn my phone around, or the computer around, but my office is just chocker block full of guns and ammo and, all the paraphernalia things we love. If that trips your trigger, there's a home for you here. I mean, for sure, whether it's at Field Ethos or any one of the media companies or in the industry in general. And I think it all stems from that passion. If you have a passion for what we do, there's a home for you, whether that's a coder, an engineer, a designer, MBA in business, a CFO, there is some kind of role. And even at OSG, where I worked for over a decade, more than a decade, about 13 years, I mean, you look at our CFO, hardcore hunter. I mean, he probably can make a far ton more money being a CFO for a different corporation, but the 2 weeks a year that he gets to go elk hunting as part of the job, man, he's in. And you see that all the way through the line, whether it's digital, social media posters, whether it's graphic designers. Those perks of the job that you don't get working for an accounting firm is really what makes people stay in this industry. But yeah, there is not a job in the world almost that probably does not exist in the outdoor industry. Like I said, everything from product development and design to computer technologies to accounting, there is a role in some corporation in this industry.
Okay. So I know there's a lot of life that you live that we haven't touched on, which, I'm sure we could talk a whole day about. What would be maybe the one thing that you've learned or wish you would have known going into all of this that you think somebody else would benefit from knowing now?
That's a good question.
It's my favorite question.
Having an innate ability or an innate thought that if you work hard, things will turn out right is probably when you're 20, you're like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm kind of, I could go this direction or that direction, but boy, that's a really low probability of success. Becoming a successful writer, becoming successful in this business financially is probably, as hard, I don't want to say it's hard physically, but as low percentage odds of saying, I want to play for the NBA. Unlike saying I want to play for the NBA or NFL, it doesn't require a God-given, natural ability. I'm 6'8" or I'm, 260 pounds. It requires hard work. And if you say, oh no, I'm going to make it in this career and I'm just going to work hard. I'm going to put my nose to the grindstone. I'm going to work hard. I'll outwork everybody else there. I'll get up earlier. I'll stay later. And believe in yourself that you will be successful. You will. It may take, and also realize it's not going to happen tomorrow. It may take 5 years. You got to be in it for the long haul, be willing to work, and believe in yourself that you'll make it happen, and you will. That's as simple as it gets.
Yeah. Kind of to your point earlier of delayed gratification, 6 years.
Yep, I think so. Just hard work for 6 years, maximizing and capitalizing on every opportunity you get, both personally as well as interpersonally when you meet people. Hard work, don't expect anything, to be given to you. Expect rejection, have a thick skin, and you will eventually make it. But I think it's, so many kids just expect that, hey, I can just do it right now. It's like, you need to put in some time, put in some hard work and you'll make it. Stay focused.
Okay. Perfect. Well, is there anything else in this morning's conversation that you would like to share or get out there that maybe you don't get asked a whole heck of a lot?
I think it's a great what you're doing. I think your podcast fantastic. Interview style is great. I wish you the best of luck. And if I can ever help out or jump on a podcast, or if you ever like to get anybody from Field Ethos on there, Jason, Dawn, etc., would love to have you. I'd love to be part of that. We can make that happen. So
yeah,
at any time moving forward, just let us know how we can help, and we'd love to do so.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mike, once again, man, thank you for taking the time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and listening to it again as I edited this afternoon was a lot of fun. I feel like I took a lot of good information away to chew on as far as, delayed gratification, putting your nose to the grindstone, networking is a big one, and also understanding that, some risk, some calculated risk in the, the near future can really impact positively, kind of depending on how you play it, right? Positively impact you in the future depending on how you plan ahead. So I hope everybody listening, I hope you all took some good information away, something to chew on. I will link Field Ethos's Field Ethos Journal's website and Instagram in the episode description. But I hope you all have a wonderful day, a great week, and we will catch you next time.